Hello and welcome to a special passenger experience roundtable presentation, The Future of the Passenger Experience. We encourage you to interact with today's speakers and each other in the Q&A chat, which you will see to your right. Today's presenters are Gabriel Lopez Bernal and Adriana Hemzacek with Icomera, and George Thiel and Tom Gebler with Sick Inc. The speakers' full bios can be found by clicking on their names below the video. Now, my first question is for George. What does the passenger experience look like in the post-pandemic world as it comes to travelers entering cities via airports and then connecting into those cities with transit?
Thanks, Joe. As we approach this new era, we and look at providing an amazing customer experience or amazing passenger experience, we would expect more monitoring and automated flow management, technology that could do this autonomously or anonymously and is driven by AI and deep learning. Things that would help improve public health in temperature monitoring, things like social distancing, face mask wearing, and congestion and crowd management. Using lots of data. Our mantra is sick sensor intelligence. And our goal is to introduce technologies that fuse sensors, use diverse redundant solutions, technologies in a sick safe way.
Gabriel, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, absolutely. At Icomera, we refer to this process as the connected journey. It's the process by which transport operators leverage our technology to connect with and influence mode choice by providing the travelers with A, connectivity, but B, also relevant and timely and often personalized information across all aspects of their trip. And transport operators today are facing increased pressure to digitize, thanks not only to the pandemic at hand, but also the prevalence of TNCs and mobility as a service. Services that have reinforced the trend that passengers require this personalized level of attention and information. And they need it pre-trip, they're looking for it en route, they're looking for it while they're on board the vehicle, and of course, onward travel. And in the post-pandemic world, we're gonna see more of this type of information being demanded in order to bring consumer confidence back to travelers and back to these modes of transportation.
Joe, I'd like to add that I think you're going to see a lot more interconnectivity between the airport's infrastructure and that of the mass transit, so that passengers are able to understand what the load is, for instance, on mass transit, and how long the queue times might be. So I think you're going to really see a much higher level of connectiveness between the networks, for instance, in the airport terminals with the mass transit systems, and that passengers are going to start demanding to really understand, how crowded is the next leg of their journey going to be. So I think that's something you're going to see a lot more of coming up here in the future.
Tom, you're absolutely right. That's certainly something that we've seen here at Icomera. Between our public transit customers and our private transport operators as well, just a higher degree of interoperability between airside and landside modes of transport. I'll take a second and highlight a new Icomera customer, the landline company. They have a really cool partnership now with airlines where their motor coaches actually meet you within the terminal, and allows you to buy essentially a two-seat ticket where you connect from plane to coach, and you finish the last leg of your journey all the way to the ski resort or your final destination on that motor coach. And it's all about, again, interoperability between these different modes, number one, but number two, providing that level of information to the passengers so that they understand all aspects of the journey, they feel comfortable and confident and able to travel with the services again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great point.
Yeah.
So let's move on. We touched upon making it a personal journey and making it more interconnected, but will the ultimate passenger experience become more standardized in a post-COVID transportation environment? Gabriel, let's start with you.
Well, I think most of our customers would agree that standard is boring. but standardization is important to a certain extent. Standardization allows us obviously to do business at a more cost-effective manner. So behind everything we do at Icomera, we want to make sure that we follow a standard platform, something that's scalable, but yet also customizable enough to amend it for the proper audiences, whether it's a public transit or authority, or a private transportation operator, or even some of these more innovative organizations that we're doing business with today. So standard is important when we're talking about interoperability and scalability, but giving that customer the flexibility to really tailor that product to their audience and really take their services to the next level is key. So we make sure that we do provide a standard and we share information in a really good way, but we give the end customer the ability to adjust that platform to really serve and market to their clientele correctly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Misha, there was a term that Joe and I used to hear all the time at AAAE at their annual meeting, and they used the term right-sized. And that's something that we really tell our customers is that, hey, what do you need? Because what we're hearing from you is that you might need this. And we want to make sure that we have the needs right before we customize that solution. And so that's why we want to right-size it. And what we're hearing across the board is that a lot of these needs are amenities, but it's 2021 and we're almost hearing that these amenities are becoming more standard, and those standard amenities are going to regain the confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. And Tom and George, I'd like to open the same question up to you.
Actually, so one of the things I'd like to add is I think everybody on this panel has been a road warrior at one time in their life. And I think we'd all like to see more standardization and sharing of best practices amongst airports and transportation systems, so that the user interface, you can walk, you'd love to see that you can walk out of any airport into any mass transit system and have a relatively similar experience. So it's easy to move from the airport to your mass transit system. So I would love to see better standardization and better sharing of best practices, so that it's comfortable to travel sort of no matter where you go.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we see is we certainly see standardization with some room available to grow, based on improvements in technology, right? So from our perspective in Industry 4.0, IoT, smart cities, sensors that, in our technology, our sensors continue to develop, and we start to, embed applications in them. It's simply not just on and off. So, anything that's going to be done with that data needs to understand that, companies like us, SICK, we're constantly developing more technology and greater, more richer data that companies can use, things like temperature, if they want to create dashboards or begin to do predictive maintenance. So, this whole entire, monitoring aspect and, standardization with room to grow as improvements in technology come about.
Excellent.
Misha, one more thing on that is a lot of regions, from what I'm hearing in transit, they might want one standard mobile app, right? Across the board, every transit agency says, maybe it should be a federal thing, everyone gets a mobile app and everyone gets a smart card, but it's just not feasible, right? That's just not reality. So what I would say is that, the ultimate passenger experience has got to be what's right for the region and what's right for the community. So Tom and George might work with this airport to, make a seamless experience by providing that information, but at the same time, it's going to be different somewhere else. And so we have to make sure that what is standard is right for the region. And that's really the bottom line. And that's what we're trying to do is, hey, you know what? It might not be 100% seamless, but we are going to help provide connectivity so that they can get the information to the passenger. And every piece of information will help get them to that better place. And so it's not about going from 0 to 60. We will help them along the way with little bits of information. And together with Tom and George and Icomera, we can help that, right? From a connectivity and data perspective.
Wonderful. Well, I'm glad you set up the next question quite nicely, because there's the move towards standardization, there's new data streams, there's new sensors. So as you're working with clients in the future to deliver this new passenger experience or improve passenger experience, what do you anticipate the top challenge to be as transportation providers, as industry partners, as you work to deliver this kind of future that we're all envisioning now?
Well, I think one of the challenges that we're seeing is the time to vet technologies. As new technologies become available for us, we're a LiDAR radar vision company with the ability to do things in AI and deep learning with edge gateways and so forth. So, if you look at the evolution of LiDAR, for example, it's evolution from a 2D rotary mirror, which is what was pretty much exclusively used years ago in the first autonomous vehicles. If you look back in time, you'll see sick LiDAR technology all over the place. And now, it's come to, it's evolved to multiple mirrors, multiplanar, 3D solid state. So I think it's, there's got to be, that time or to vet these new technologies as they keep on rolling out at an unprecedented rate, right? And then I think there's also got to be a community of sharing. So I think Gabriel and Adriana had mentioned, we're a sensors company, and we rely on their technology to take that data and do great things with it. But so we see, this community of sharing. We have our own developers community that is basically open to anybody, really, and so that they can build applications within our technology, something similar to the Apple and other technologies. So we really want and try to promote this this community of sharing, not just in a single industry. So I think there's a lot of things that we can share in the broad areas of industries that we're in. And so I think there's this whole entire issue of vetting technology and the time that it takes to do that.
I think from a public policy perspective, probably one of the biggest challenges will be budget. But when you look at what has happened to transportation in the coronavirus era, you realize that unless you're prepared for the next novel coronavirus, you could see these kind of greatly shrinking passenger loads. So I think a lot of it is about finding the money potentially through the stimulus or somewhere else to add resilience to your system, so that the next time we have a sort of unexpected pandemic, that the systems are already built to be resilient and already built to make customers feel comfortable that they're going to have a safe travel experience.
And Tom, you're absolutely right. Budget is partly to blame. We've been spending a lot of time here at Icomera lately reading through transit agencies' strategic plans, understanding what they have planned to do over the next 5, 10, 15, or even longer years. And something that we take a look at and we notice is a common theme is that they've made numerous investments that haven't served them well for the full life of that desired investment. And part of it is politics, part of it is budget cycles, part of it is what we find a lack of a technology roadmap or a framework to kind of guide them, something that would transcend these different political and economic factors that they're going to experience over the next few years. So one of the recommendations we always bring to the table as a partner to our transit agencies and private operators is sit down and work on a framework that is going to help you weather events such as COVID over the next 5, 10, 15 years, so that you make sound technology investments and are able to anticipate to the best of your ability what blips might come later on down the road.
Mm-hmm.
There's a conversation I had recently with a few folks down over at CTA. I'm in the Chicagoland area. And I said to them, continue to do what you do best as an operator, right? I'm not an operator, but I'm a rider. And I said, make your first impression, make it great again, and make it to the point where I'm going to come back. So I always say your top challenge is to recreate that great first impression. Recreate that, have me have a wonderful experience. I have reliable service. I have a clean station. I have a on-time arrival, and I can connect and I can tell my spouse that I will be home at a certain time.
Mhm.
That first impression will make passengers like myself come back again.
Mhm.
So it's all about back to basics, right? Get that basic, get that framework. And then when you have the chance and you have the passengers back, then start dusting off those awesome ideas on the shelf and start putting money into them as the money comes in. But you've got to create that new advocate in that rider again, right?
Mhm.
Recreate those riders, those transit advocates, and have them tell the great stories of how wonderful it is to be back on the L train or the bus. That's my advice to them as a top challenge, is try to recreate that great first impression.
Mhm.
I think sort of following up on that, as people begin coming back into the office, for instance, they're going to have choices for their, do they drive? Do they take mass transit? And just what Adriana is saying is you have to make it attractive to get back on transit, because I think people are right now are hesitant, and we want to make that, we want to put in the systems in place to make sure that people are comfortable with their mass transit experience.
Now, a lot of focus in the past year has been on the negative passenger sentiments towards travel, as transport operators have struggled to stay afloat while under incredible financial stress.
Mhm.
So I wanted to start with Tom here. How have you managed to balance an impactful health crisis while continuing to support your clients and innovate?
Thanks, Joe. That's a really good question. I mean, our company, SICK, has always been sort of concerned about the health and welfare of the population in general. And we saw it as an opportunity to turn our R&D money towards public safety, public health. We already do quite a few systems for monitoring, let's say, the gas output of large incinerators or large refineries. And the idea is we can take some of the experience we've had there, as well as our sensor experience, and turn our R&D towards making, physical distancing, for instance, using our LiDAR technology. At the same time, when we were really participating in the boom in e-commerce, which really helped our company last year. At the same time, we were turning our R&D towards a more healthful experience for people.
George, what about your side?
Yeah. So building on what Tom had mentioned, we are a company that's been known 75 years worth of protecting people. If you have somebody that works in a manufacturing or a logistics facility, chances are they're being protected by our technology. And then, as Tom had mentioned, we have a focus on protecting the planet by monitoring, any bad gases that are leaving diesel engines from ships and so forth, and including a new technology that we recently introduced to monitor the air quality on subway platforms and metro platforms. And so, we've taken that 75-year history, our founders, true belief in creating a better world for everybody, in this new solution that we created, and focusing on buses and providing an accurate count of people getting in and out of buses. And then once inside the vehicle, we can then accurately determine how many people are there, how many empty seats there are. Show that, as Adriana had mentioned, so that on an app, right? Count the number of people, count the number of people that are maintaining a social distance. And to Adriana's point also, it's a solution that is end to end, but there's a lot of gaps that we can fill. So, our technology gives us the opportunity to route optimize and fleet optimize. We were talking today about, is with all these autonomous shuttles, does a bus operator's fleet look like a fleet that's of varied sizes, right? You can put our technology outdoors so that you can monitor the number of people that are waiting at bus stops, and maybe dispatch a large bus or a small bus or whatever. And once you've got our technology on board, you can start looking at driver fatigue, red light detection, agitated rider detection, and there's so many things that we can do through AI and deep learning these days, with our technology.
And with a company name like SICK, you would think this is something we really ought to do. It is, by the way, it's the name of our founder, Erwin SICK. So I guess it's our job in life now to protect public health and safety.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. So earlier, Adriana picked up on in her example with CTA about rebuilding those advocates for transit and rebuilding advocates for the airspace. For all these passengers need to kind of share their good experiences, but we have to build their confidence first. So what's one way that transport operators can bring back passengers? And let's start with the Icomera folks, with Gabriel and Adriana.
Well, the confidence, you said the word right there, Misha. Confidence is key. How do we rebuild trust? How do we, allow passengers to recognize that they can, again, trust the transport services to get them safely and reliably from their origin to their destination? So it's a matter really of being able to communicate, the reliability of the service. But then on top of that, this new burden that transport operators have, that they're maintaining the health and safety of their passengers, and really what's going into that to make sure that passengers are remaining safe while in transit. We've seen transit operators reduce the capacity of their vehicles to anywhere between 40 and 60% of the total vehicle load, and communicating that actively to their passengers, saying, hey, we're putting more vehicles out on the road so that we can keep capacity, in this range that we feel is safest. Other operators are asking us now to transmit real-time passenger loads and capacities, again, with the intention of providing and empowering the passenger to make the decision that's right for them. They see a bus that's coming that is at a 50%, capacity. Do you feel comfortable boarding that bus, or are you going to wait for the next service? Mm-hmm. So it's really about empowering the passenger to make the right decision for themselves, but also at the same time giving them the confidence that what you're doing as an operator is going to maintain their health and safety, just as it would of, from a physical standpoint of preventing collisions and other things on that vehicle in normal pre-COVID times.
So Gabriel talks about communication, and there's one thing that I always like to kind of bring us back to basics, right? We're all riders ourselves, but we all work on the technology side, is that the real-time communication, it can happen like in the palm of your hand, right? So what we're doing with our team over in the UK called Go Media is that they can actually have a portal, and a component of this portal on board is a two-way communication system. So you are on the train. This seems really simple, right? But you can actually communicate to the operator and tell them what's working and what's not working, because you're not going to do it when you get off. And so having that is so simple, right? You're getting that real-time feedback of how is the ride? What can I do better? And then that feedback is instant. It goes back to the operator, and they can make the fix the next week, month, whatever it'll take to get that back. I hear about some agencies, sending out monthly surveys or an annual survey, but who remembers the trip that they took 4 months ago, right? So this is all about sending information to the transport rider. Maybe when they leave the station, maybe it's pushed to them, and then they can give you the feedback, the honest, true feedback right there. And then there's folks like me on the other end who's actually listening on social media and listening to what our customers are saying to say how it was. And then I'm there saying, hey, you know what? Customer A, if you didn't hear this, here you go. Let's talk about this next week, and let's figure out how we can make it happen.
All right. George and Tom from the SICK side of things. Any thoughts?
I guess one of the things I would say is you find that a lot of travelers today are very comfortable with apps. And you can get an app that can show you what your bag's progress as it's moving through the baggage system, or if it's been unloaded from the plane. And I think you're finding people are very much more comfortable today with an app on their phone, and they're really more demanding of real-time information. And I think one of the things that we can do is provide them with the kind of real-time information between the high-speed networks, as well as sensor packages, that can give them a real true sense of, for instance, what Gabriel was saying is, how much load is on that particular bus that's coming up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the things that, if you look at our solution of people counting, so I remember when I guess the point being, if the data isn't good data, then no matter what you put on that app, you want to make sure that if you're going to get on the bus, or the rider's going to get on the bus, and it says, there's 5 people on that bus, and there's 22 seats that are free, it's got to be accurate. So I know when we first introduced our people counter, we did a campaign, and I had one of my partners call me up, and he's like, "George, what is this stuff? I just walked in to the gym, and my buddy and it counted me, but it didn't count my buddy. And it tells me that there's 7 people in the gym, but there's 14 people in the lower level, and there's 28 people in the upper level." And he's like, he asked me, "How accurate is this?" And the approach that we took in looking at passenger count and what you could do, the information that you could provide on an app is actually verified, right? So there's a sensor at each entry of the bus, and then the cabin itself is then verified with a completely different technology. And again, both keeps the person's privacy intact. It's not a camera. It's something much different than that.
Now, infrastructure projects are often considered a really significant investment that can be kind of a daunting undertaking for a lot of cities and regions. And I want to start with George on this. What are some smaller scale investments that regions and cities can make to make a bigger impact over time?
Joe, that's a great question. And I think I thought about this question, had some time to think about this question. And so I thought about the things that we do from the fundamentals of the investment in our children, young men and women, and our future engineers. We at SICK spend a lot of time at the educational institutions by providing technology and just watching future engineers do some amazing things with our technology. And then there, in one case, we actually have this 10K challenge where engineering STEM students or whatever will take our technology, and they do get the $10,000 check, but then they get an opportunity to visit our facilities over in Germany, which is something really great to see. And so, we're continuously, making connections at the high school level, at the university level, and funding that future, the future, women and men in engineering.
Gabriel, Adriana?
Yeah. I guess taking the question in a slightly different direction there than George, we are obviously a connectivity company, and we provide a platform that allows for centralized connectivity, and it allows transit agencies and operators to build around and scale the solution. So it allows an entity to come in and make an investment and build around it over time in a modular fashion that allows them to maybe not anticipate what their needs might be 3, 5, 7 years down the road, but the platform is malleable enough that it's going to allow them to grow and continue, reaping the benefits of that centralized connectivity investment. So from our perspective, we see it as an investment in technology that not only positively impacts your operations and some of your services over time, but then going back to the root of this whole conference, the passenger experience allows those regions and those operators to provide a superior passenger experience from the very beginning. And that really is the heart of it. It's how do you anticipate your future business needs while solving some of the problems and requirements that you have today to improve the experience on board the vehicles. And it's designed to scale large regions, small regions. We do business with major metropolitan regions here in North America, all the way down to some of the smallest towns in Montana. So it really doesn't matter to us the size or the scale of the agency or the operator. The platform is designed to scale to these organizations.
I would add to that and say, is it the passenger experience today, or is it the future of travel, right? So we have a really interesting title for this conference. So are we going to invest in a new BRT line and start with our, feasibility study? Or are we going to make the investment in something that our passengers today can use? And I think the answer to that is listen to what your region's saying, right? Maybe you're at a public meeting and you're talking about your strategic plan, or you're planning for your next plan update. What do they want? Do they want societal benefits across every single line? Do they want connectivity on every single line, whether you're north, south, east, west? Or do you want a new, for example, BRT line that takes you to this one little area downtown? For us at Icomera, we always like to measure the societal benefits and make sure that equity is across the board and that everyone has those basic amenities in 2021. Over to you.
Tom, anything from the airport side?
Well, I think you could certainly pilot smaller sensor applications to do people counting, for instance, and use that to better gauge how much room you're going to need, for instance, for queuing, or are you going to be able to manage loads on the bus? So I think looking at physical separation, people counting is something they can do on a pilot, and really judge how well the system was working. At the same time, laying in a network architecture that will support future growth that's going to be inevitable.
So let's talk metrics for a moment. We've been discussing the passenger experience, but how will we be able to define and measure passenger satisfaction in the future?
Yeah, so this is definitely something we've been talking a lot about here at Icomera, and we've been working towards. Passenger satisfaction is kind of an oblique term. So how do you quantify this? How do you qualify it correctly? And what we've started using is social sentiment. Adriana hinted at it earlier in this conversation. We're tracking what people are saying about services in as near real time as possible. And some of our transit operator partners are really paying attention to the quality of the amenities that they're providing. As Adriana touched on, the social benefit of the services that we're providing on board these vehicles. And then how do you measure the quality of that? Well, we're listening. We're actively listening to social media, because that's the one place where people can become your biggest proponent of your services or the biggest detractor of your services. So we're actively listening to see how people are reacting to the quality of the connectivity that we're providing out there, that onboard experience. And some of our transit agency and operator partners are starting to use this to actually measure performance of their executives. So if their customer satisfaction scores go up, everybody shares in the overall benefit of this, and bonuses are shared. And if customer satisfaction goes down, well, then I think everybody's wallet stays a little bit lighter. So it's a really interesting concept that's being applied. And it's something that we're really trying to sink our teeth into to make sure that we help drive that passenger experience in the right direction.
Tom and George, do you want to weigh in on this at all, or?
What I was going to say was, that's really impressive, because, I was thinking, pretty, that's much more granular than I was anticipating you could get passenger data. I was thinking about more on the macro scale, return trips, how, growth. Those are numbers that are really, there's not much behind them. You don't really understand what's behind them. And I love what they're, what Icomera is talking about is really drilling down and really understanding passenger sentiment. It's very impressive to me.
Excellent. Well, with a mind on the time here, I want to say thanks to George, Tom, Gabriel, and Adriana for sharing their thoughts and expertise with us today. As a reminder, the chat remains open. Go ahead and pose your questions. We'll have experts on the back end to answer your questions. Today's session will be available here on the Passenger Experience event platform for the next 6 months. On behalf of the Passenger Experience and our sponsors, thank you all for joining us today.